Have you ever read an ancient text, maybe a piece of scripture or a myth, and you get this sudden, really unsettling realization that you were only looking at the shadow of its true meaning?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very specific kind of dissonance.
Right. You're staring at the surface of a text that seems, straightforward, but you get this nagging intuitive feeling that there is an entire complex ecosystem just moving around down there in the depths.
Yeah, you recognize the words on the page,
Yeah.
you know their dictionary definitions.
Exactly. But you can sense they're actually functioning as a code, like a cipher. And you're just standing there on the shoreline, completely lacking the key to unlock it.
That dissonance is honestly one of the most profound experiences a reader can have because, well, we operate in a modern paradigm where information is designed for immediate, literal consumption.
We just want the data.
We want data, and we want it transferred efficiently. But ancient texts, and specifically the theological frameworks we're diving into today, they simply were not constructed with that utilitarian mindset.
No, they were built on a foundation of deeply layered, interconnected metaphors.
Right. And when we apply our modern literal reading habits to an ancient multidimensional cipher, we don't just misunderstand the text, we often render it completely absurd.
Which brings us to the core of today's deep dive. We are unpacking a rather extraordinary lecture that tackles this exact problem.
It really is a fascinating piece of source material.
The transcript we're exploring attempts something incredibly ambitious. It takes a series of mundane, everyday concepts found across various ancient biblical texts. Words like lamps, blindness, deafness, light, nighttime, eyes.
Very common words.
Right. And it argues that none of them mean what a surface-level reading suggests. Instead, it treats these writings not as literal historical diaries, but as a cohesive, deeply psychological and spiritual cipher.
It's connecting dots across Exodus, Hebrews, Revelation, Zechariah, and Matthew.
Yeah, and it's using the text's own internal logic to decode itself.
The goal here is a complete dismantling of our standard surface-level assumptions. It is a rigorous exercise in critical thinking.
The mission of this deep dive is to figure that out.
The lecture essentially challenges you to stop memorizing the shapes of shadows on the wall and to turn around and look at the reality casting them.
It requires stripping away centuries of literalism.
Yes, to uncover a sophisticated architectural framework for human psychology and spiritual authority.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the argument doesn't begin with some grand apocalyptic vision of dragons and cosmic wars.
No, not at all.
It starts with the most basic, relatable human experience imaginable. To understand the grand cosmic architecture, we actually have to start with a piece of pottery and a little bit of oil, a humble, everyday lamp.
Grounding the cosmic in the domestic is actually a hallmark of ancient Near Eastern thought. To comprehend the metaphor, we first have to understand the sheer physical reality of the object in its original context.
Right, we're talking about an agrarian, pre-industrial society.
Exactly. A lamp is defined entirely by its relationship to the night. It is a tool engineered specifically for darkness.
And we really should pause here to consider what night meant epistemologically in the ancient world.
It was a very different experience than what we have today.
Yeah, this isn't just about it being dark outside. In an era without ambient light, without, infrastructure illuminating the horizon, night was a time of complete vulnerability.
Total isolation.
The darkness was an impenetrable barrier. It suspended normal life. It was a time of unknown threats and of waiting.
The epistemology of a night is exactly the right angle. In the dark, your ability to perceive reality is reduced to almost zero.
You literally cannot trust your senses.
You cannot navigate. So the lamp, therefore, isn't just a tool for convenience. It is a localized technology of truth.
A localized technology of truth. I like that.
It pushes back the chaos just enough to allow for perception. And the lecture identifies two primary literal functions for this tool.
The first is navigation, right? Lighting the immediate path to prevent a catastrophic fall.
Right. It provides localized illumination for the journey, but the second function is far more nuanced, and it's where the metaphor really takes root.
The illumination of a face.
Yes, for the purpose of recognition.
So the lecture paints a very specific scenario here. You are in your home. It's the middle of the night, total darkness.
Pitch black.
And suddenly, there's a knock at the door. A voice outside claims to be your husband.
In a world where the night is synonymous with deception, a knock at the door is inherently alarming.
Right, you're on edge.
And the voice makes a claim of authority and intimacy. I'm your husband, open the door. But the physical barrier of the door and the visual barrier of the dark, they make immediate verification impossible.
Now, I want to challenge the premise slightly here. Why zero in on the husband? A lamp is used to identify anyone, right?
Okay.
A neighbor, a tax collector, a thief. By focusing so heavily on the husband, aren't we risking over-spiritualizing a very practical action?
It's a fair critique, for sure, but we have to read the scenario within the broader linguistic ecosystem of the text.
Okay, meaning what?
Well, in ancient biblical literature, the relationship between the divine and humanity, or, the ultimate truth and the seeker, is consistently, almost obsessively framed through the motif of marriage.
Ah, so the husband represents something specific.
The husband represents the arrival of legitimate authority, the ultimate truth that the household has been waiting for during the long night.
So the scenario is carefully chosen to mirror a theological waiting period.
Precisely. If you simply throw the door open to any voice in the dark claiming authority, you invite disaster. The night is full of imposters.
So the lamp becomes an instrument of verification. You don't just crack the door and hope for the best.
Never.
You raise the lamp, you cast light on the face, and you verify that the reality matches the claim. It's essentially an ancient lie detector.
That's a great way to put it. And this mundane action is the foundation for the entire philosophical cipher. The night represents a historical or spiritual era of waiting.
A time of ignorance or obscured truth.
Yes. And the lamp is the necessary discernment, the internal preparation, the tool you must possess to recognize the truth when it finally arrives at your door.
Wow.
Without that tool, you are susceptible to the first charismatic voice that speaks in the dark.
That sets the stakes incredibly high. It shifts the lamp from being a physical object to an internal state of readiness.
It does.
But the lecture doesn't let us stay in the domestic sphere for very long. It takes this intimate bedside concept and scales it up to an institutional national level.
We move from a peasant's house to the Book of Exodus.
Right, where Moses is standing on a mountain receiving an architectural blueprint from God.
This is a fascinating transition because we are literally watching the domestication of the divine.
The text in Exodus 25 details the construction of the tabernacle, the portable temple used by the Israelites.
And the instructions are notoriously rigid. Moses is commanded to build the tabernacle and its central lampstand exactly according to the pattern shown to him.
It is an exercise in absolute precision.
Yeah.
And the details of this lampstand are staggering compared to, just a clay bowl.
Oh, it's massive.
It's a huge golden structure, hammered from a single piece of pure gold. It has a central shaft with 6 branches, making 7 lamps in total.
And it's strictly commanded to burn pure, pressed olive oil from evening until morning.
The materials and the mechanics here are deeply symbolic, aren't they?
Incredibly symbolic. The choice of pure, hammered gold, which was likely polished to a mirror-like finish, that speaks to the reflection of divine light.
And the fuel is even more significant.
Yes. Olive oil requires immense pressure. The olives must be crushed. It represents a distillation of life, an extraction of purity through suffering or immense effort.
And the temporal instruction to burn it from evening until morning anchors us right back to our original premise.
The lamp, no matter how grand, is still fundamentally a tool for the night.
It is a placeholder of light during the absence of the sun. Let's talk about the architecture of where this golden lampstand was actually placed, because the lecture makes a brilliant spatial argument here. The tabernacle was essentially divided by a thick veil.
Right, 2 distinct rooms.
You had the outer room, called the holy place, and the inner room, the most holy place, where the Ark of the Covenant sat. The lampstand was placed in that outer room.
The spatial arrangement is a physical map of spiritual proximity. The lecture uses a highly relatable analogy to decode this ancient floor plan, comparing it to a multi-generational family home.
Right, I love this part. It compares the outer room, the holy place where the priests are working and the lamp is burning, to the main living area of a house.
Like the living room and kitchen.
Yeah, it's where the parents and children interact, where the daily maintenance of life happens. But the inner room, behind the veil, is likened to the quarters of the grandparents.
It's a place of ultimate reverence, quiet, and ultimate unquestioned authority.
By framing it this way, the abstract, intimidating structure of a divine temple becomes completely legible to the human experience.
What's fascinating here is that the lecture doesn't just want us to admire the architecture. It introduces a philosophical earthquake by pulling in the book of Hebrews from the New Testament.
Oh man, this part is wild.
Hebrews looks back at this massive, golden, meticulously crafted tabernacle and completely dismisses its ultimate reality.
It calls the physical structure, the gold, the veil, the lampstand, a mere shadow or copy of a heavenly reality.
A shadow.
The transcript emphasizes these terms heavily. It points out the Chinese words for shadow and copy. I find this concept of the shadow so compelling, but also a bit perplexing. Are we talking about a Platonic ideal here?
That's a really common question.
Is the lecture suggesting that Moses was building a physical replica of a literal golden tent sitting up in the clouds somewhere?
That's a crucial distinction to make. While it sounds very similar to Plato's theory of forms, the idea that the physical world is just a flawed reflection of perfect abstract concepts, the Hebraic concept of a shadow in this context is slightly different. It's not about a physical object mirroring a superior physical object in another dimension. It's about a physical ritual mirroring a spiritual mechanism.
So less about the object and more about how it functions.
Think about the physical properties of a shadow on a wall. It gives you the outline. It tells you the general shape, the posture, perhaps the movement of the object casting it.
But a shadow has no mass.
Exactly. It has no color, no texture, no inherent life. You cannot interact with a shadow in any meaningful way. If you try to embrace it, you just close your arms around empty air.
So the argument is that memorizing the measurements of the golden lampstand, or obsessing over the type of wood used for the poles, or perfectly executing the rituals in the outer room, all of that is totally useless if you don't understand what is casting the shadow.
Exactly. It's a ferocious critique of religious literalism and institutional idolatry.
To memorize the text literally is to become an expert in the geometry of a shadow while remaining completely ignorant of the entity standing right behind you.
The physical lampstand Moses built was never the ultimate point.
It was an educational tool.
A placeholder designed to train the human mind to comprehend a much deeper, more complex spiritual reality that would eventually be revealed.
Which raises such an introspective question for anyone listening. How many of the structures in our own lives, our routines, our inherited beliefs, the institutions we defend so fiercely, are just shadows?
It's a tough question to sit with.
How often do we memorize the rules of the shadow, fiercely debate the edges of the shadow, while totally missing the vibrant, dynamic reality it was supposed to point us toward?
It is the perennial trap of human nature. We prefer the shadow because it is measurable, it is static, and it is safe.
We can control it.
We can control our interpretation of it. The reality casting the shadow is often disruptive, demanding, and completely uncontrollable. But the lecture demands that we follow the shadow back to its source. We have to decode what Moses was actually pointing to.
And to find that source, to figure out what casts the shadow, the lecture jumps across centuries. We're moving from the desert wanderings of Exodus to the cosmic, apocalyptic visions of the Book of Revelation.
We are attempting to decode the cosmic cipher.
We shift from the physical blueprint to the metaphysical reality. In Revelation chapter 4, the author, John, describes a vision of the heavenly throne room, and before the throne, he sees 7 lamps of fire burning.
But crucially, the text doesn't leave this as a visual mystery. It explicitly provides the key, stating that these 7 lamps of fire are the 7 spirits of God.
Okay, let's track the math here. The physical shadow on earth was a golden lampstand with 7 bowls of oil.
Right.
The heavenly reality casting that shadow is 7 spirits of fire. Moses' lampstand equals the 7 spirits of God. But the lecture introduces a philosophical engine that drives this entire decoding process.
The principle of on earth as it is in heaven.
It's a foundational concept in ancient cosmology.
The idea is that heaven and earth are not isolated dimensions. They are intrinsically linked. If there is a heavenly reality, in this case, 7 divine spirits functioning as lamps, there must be a corresponding living manifestation in the earthly realm.
Not just a piece of metal serving as a shadow, but an actual active counterpart.
Right. So we have to solve for X.
We need the earthly side of the equation.
Yeah.
And the lecture finds the decoder ring in Revelation chapter 1, verse 20. The text explicitly unravels the mystery, stating the 7 lamps are the 7 churches.
Now the equation expands. The heavenly lamps equal the 7 spirits. The earthly lamps equal the 7 churches.
But here is where we have to pause and strip away our modern cultural baggage. When you or I hear the word church today, we immediately visualize real estate.
Brick and mortar.
We think of a building with a steeple, stained glass, pews, a mortgage. We think of an institution.
And if we apply that modern definition, the cipher breaks down completely. A building cannot hold a divine spirit in any meaningful, interactive way.
A building doesn't possess the agency to provide spiritual illumination.
Right, so the lecture brings in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16 to redefine the term according to the ancient writer's own vocabulary. The text asks, "Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you?"
The text categorically redefines church and temple not as mortar and stone, but as human beings.
This is the critical leap in the logic. The vessel for the divine is not architectural, it is biological, it is human.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's run the final calculation. If lamps equal churches and churches equal people, then the 7 lamps on earth actually equals 7 people.
Human messengers, leaders, or vessels on earth who hold within them the 7 spirits of God.
The text also refers to them in the same breath as the 7 stars. Now, I really struggle with this leap, and I want to push back on the methodology here.
Sure, let's hear it.
If a lamp, a church, a star, and a temple all ultimately just mean a person, aren't we just stripping these words of their actual meaning to force a puzzle to fit? It feels incredibly convenient. If everything can mean anything, then the text means nothing.
That is a highly valid criticism of allegorical interpretation.
It just becomes an exercise in confirmation bias, where the interpreter can make the text say whatever they want.
And that's a danger whenever you step away from strict literalism.
Yeah.
But the lecture's argument is that this isn't arbitrary shape-shifting. The ancient writers weren't just throwing random metaphors at the wall.
They weren't just being poetic.
No, they were utilizing a sophisticated, multidimensional vocabulary to describe a reality that is too complex for a single term. Think about how we describe light in physics today.
Okay.
Is it a particle or is it a wave?
It's both, right? Depending on how you measure it.
Exactly. It exhibits properties of both, depending on how you measure it, and we need both vocabularies to describe the single reality of a photon. The ancient writers are doing something similar with the human-divine relationship.
They are describing the symbiosis between a vessel and its contents.
Yes, the human being is the physical vessel, the temple structure, the earthly lamp. The divine intelligence, the truth, is the content, the oil, the flame, the heavenly spirit.
You cannot have localized light without both. A lamp with no oil provides no light. Oil poured on the ground without a lamp cannot be sustained or directed.
Precisely. So when the text wants to emphasize their heavenly origin and their role in cosmic navigation, it calls them stars.
Okay, that makes sense.
When it wants to emphasize their practical function of providing localized truth in a dark world, it calls them lamps. When it wants to emphasize their sanctity and the indwelling of the divine presence, it calls them temples.
So the different metaphors are highlighting different attributes of the exact same phenomenon. It's not interpretive chaos. It's a highly structured, multidimensional cipher designed to communicate one profound reality.
Which is that the ultimate mechanism for divine revelation on earth is the human mind and the human voice, acting as a vessel for truth.
It's like looking at a complex sculpture from different angles in the room. From the front, it looks like a star. From the side, it looks like a lamp. From the back, it looks like a temple. But it's the exact same sculpture.
And once you accept that the writers are using varied imagery to describe the exact same physical and spiritual mechanic, the most difficult and bizarre passages of the ancient texts suddenly become perfectly legible.
Which brings us to some of the strangest imagery in the entire biblical canon. Because once you establish that a lamp is a metaphor for a truth-filled human, you run headfirst into apocalyptic literature that seems designed to just confuse and terrify the reader.
We're talking about horns, eyes, and floating, bleeding stones.
Yeah, let's talk about the horns and eyes. Apocalyptic literature is a genre that thrives on sensory overload and jarring juxtaposition.
It is entirely designed to shock the reader out of complacency.
In Revelation chapter 5, John sees a vision of a lamb standing as though it had been slain. But this lamb has 7 horns and 7 eyes. If we force a literal reading on this, we end up with something grotesque.
Very grotesque.
It's a mutated farm animal. It belongs in a sci-fi horror movie or a nightmare, not a theological treatise. A bleeding lamb with 7 horns jutting out of its skull and 7 eyeballs swiveling around. It makes absolutely no sense, and frankly, it's disturbing.
It is deeply disturbing if viewed literally, which is exactly why the author embedded the decoding mechanism right there in the text.
The author doesn't want you to fixate on the monster.
They want you to read the symbols. The text explicitly equates the 7 horns to earthly power and the 7 eyes to the 7 spirits of God sent out into the earth.
Let's break down the political and historical theology of those symbols. Why horns?
In the ancient Near East, the horn is a universal symbol of dominion, military might, and political power. Think of a bull or a ram. To have a horn is to have agency and force in the physical world. Kings were often depicted with horned headdresses.
Ah, so the horn represents the earthly vessel, the human agent possessing authority or power in the physical realm.
Which maps perfectly onto the lamp or the church from our previous equation. It's the earthly vessel.
Exactly. And the eyes.
The text states they are the seven spirits. The eye is the universal symbol of perception, of omniscience, of seeing the truth of a matter.
So saying a lamb has 7 horns and 7 eyes is just an incredibly dramatic, apocalyptic way of saying there is a divine force utilizing human vessels, the horns, who possess divine perception and truth, the eyes.
It is the exact same math as the 7 lamps and the 7 spirits.
The cipher holds up perfectly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it holds up across entirely different books and eras. The lecture takes us back hundreds of years before Revelation to the prophet Zechariah to prove that this cipher is embedded deep in the tradition.
Right. In Zechariah chapters 3 and 4, the prophet is given a vision of a single stone, and carved into this single stone are 7 eyes.
Again, surreal imagery, a rock covered in eyeballs.
But look at the sequence of the visions. Immediately after seeing the stone with 7 eyes, Zechariah sees a golden lampstand.
It's almost identical to the shadow Moses built, a bowl on top with 7 lamps.
But this one has a crucial, impossible upgrade. Standing on either side of the lampstand are 2 living olive trees. And these trees are feeding golden oil directly into the bowl through golden pipes.
It's a biological perpetual motion machine.
The crushing of the olives is totally removed. The oil flows endlessly, directly from the living source to the flame.
And this is where the lecture highlights a moment of profound humility that modern readers desperately need to emulate.
Oh, this is great. The angelic guide asks Zechariah, do you know what these are?
Right. And Zechariah, who is a major canonical prophet, a man whose literal job is to see visions and explain them, he looks at this lampstand and says, "No, my lord, I have absolutely no idea what I'm looking at."
That detail is so vindicating. The lecture uses that moment to skewer modern theological arrogance.
Totally. If Zechariah, an ancient prophet steeped in this culture and language, looked at the lampstand and didn't assume he understood it, how can a modern reader sitting in a comfortable chair thousands of years later claim they have it all figured out based on a cursory, literal reading?
It's a powerful indictment of the assumption that ancient texts are simple. Zechariah asks for the meaning, and the angel doesn't give him an engineering schematic.
The angel gives him a spiritual principle. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. The oil flowing from those trees is explicitly defined as the spirit.
And the lecture ties this beautifully to Psalm 119, verse 105. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path.
By weaving these threads together, the overarching mechanic becomes undeniable.
Whether the text uses the word lamp, stone, horn, or church, it is describing a physical, human vessel operating in the world.
Yes. And whether it uses the word I, spirit, oil, or word, it is describing the divine substance, the truth, perception, intelligence that illuminates that vessel.
The 2 olive trees represent the infinite living supply of this truth. The system relies entirely on the connection between the vessel and the source.
It's a stunningly elegant system once you get past the bizarre imagery. A human being hooked up to an endless source of truth, radiating that truth to guide others in the dark.
But this elegant system has a fatal vulnerability.
It does.
What happens if the connection is severed? The lecture pivots from the mechanics of inspiration to a deeply unsettling warning about what happens when the system fails.
We have to return to the foundational environment, the night.
Why are the lamps necessary in the first place? Because it is dark.
But why is it dark? The lecture points us to Psalm 84, verse 11, which states, "For the Lord God is a sun and shield."
So if God, representing ultimate reality and absolute truth, is the sun, then the nighttime is the metaphorical era we are living in right now.
It's a period where the ultimate truth is obscured, distant, or has not fully dawned on humanity.
We are navigating the long night. And during the night, the lamps, these truth-filled human messengers, are not just helpful, they are essential for survival.
They are the only way to avoid the ditches. They're the only way to verify the faces in the dark.
But then we look at Revelation chapter 2, verse 5, and we find a terrifying threat directed at one of these churches, which we now know means one of these human messengers holding the light.
Right. The text says, "Remember, therefore, from where you have fallen, repent, and do the works you did at first." If not, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place unless you repent.
Remove your lampstand. That is the ultimate sanction. But what does that actually look like in reality? If the lamp is a person and the lampstand is removed, what happens? Do they physically disappear? Does a trapdoor open and they're gone?
The lecture argues that the reality of the threat is far more insidious and terrifying than physical death. Let's go back to the mechanics. The lampstand is the vessel. The oil is the spirit of truth.
Okay.
Removing the lampstand means withdrawing the spirit. It means severing the golden pipes from the olive trees.
When the oil stops flowing, the flame dies. The lamp goes out.
The person is left in total, impenetrable spiritual darkness. But here is the horror of the situation. The physical vessel does not cease to exist.
They don't vanish.
No, they may still retain their title. They may still hold their position of authority within the institution.
They might still stand at the pulpit every week, write best-selling books, or direct the community. To the outward eye, the structure of the lamp is perfectly intact.
But they are producing no light. They have become what the ancient texts refer to as the blind and the deaf.
They have lost the divine perception, the eyes that made them a guide in the first place.
They are surrounded by the night, utterly oblivious to the truth, yet they continue to operate with the momentum of their past illumination. They are a lamp without oil, proudly displaying a wick that is cold, dead, and charred.
The tragedy of confident ignorance. They believe they're still guiding people, but they are just stumbling around in the dark, leading everyone who trusts them right off a cliff.
It is the terrifying reality of institutional decay.
You could be dedicating your life to following a leader, an institution, or a philosophy that has all the credentials, all the historical pedigree, and is officially recognized as a lampstand. But internally, spiritually, the plug has been pulled.
A structure can survive long after its animating spirit has departed, and the danger to the follower is immense. To rely on a lamp that casts no light is a fast track to disaster.
Which brings us to the necessary radical response required when you realize your guide is blind.
And this response is encapsulated in what might be the most shocking, provocative, and frequently misunderstood metaphor in the entire source material.
We are moving to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 29. Jesus delivers a command that has haunted readers for millennia. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and throw it away.
It is a viscerally horrifying image, gouging out your own eyeball.
For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell.
Throughout history, interpreters have wrestled violently with this text. Some have tried to soften it into a metaphor for strict personal discipline regarding lust or greed.
Tragically, in rare instances of religious mania, some have taken it literally, resulting in actual self-mutilation.
The lecture, however, mounts a fierce, almost passionate argument against any personal, physical interpretation of this verse, literal or metaphorical.
The lecture points out a fatal flaw in applying this to personal, physical temptation.
It observes that human nature is inherently universally susceptible to temptation from the moment of cognitive awareness.
It humorously notes that even a young child understands physical attraction, knows who they think is pretty, and desires things they shouldn't have.
The argument is fundamentally logical. If this verse meant that you should physically destroy the organ that perceives temptation in the world, the inevitable result would be a planet of blind people.
If the solution to living in a corrupted world is to blind yourself to it, you don't fix the corruption. You just render yourself a defenseless victim who can't see the danger approaching.
It makes zero sense as a practical ethic. Every spiritual leader, every prophet, every human being would have to mutilate themselves.
Therefore, plucking out the eye cannot possibly be about personal physical temptation. The word eye is functioning as a cipher, just like the lamp, the star, and the horn.
To decode it, the lecture directs us back to the Old Testament, to the prophet Isaiah, chapter 29, verses 9 and 10. This passage is the Rosetta Stone for understanding the shocking command in Matthew.
I have the Isaiah passage right here. It reads, "Astonish yourselves and be astonished. Blind yourselves and be blind. Be drunk, but not with wine. Stagger, but not with strong drink.
And here comes the key.
For the Lord has poured out upon you a spirit of deep sleep, and has closed your eyes, the prophets, and covered your heads, the seers."
Notice the internal decoding happening right there in the text. The text says, God has closed their eyes, and then it immediately defines what the eyes are.
The prophets.
And he has covered their heads. And what are the heads defined as?
The seers.
There is the cipher, explicitly stated. In the anatomy of a spiritual community, the eyes and the heads are not literal body parts. They are the leaders, the prophets.
The seers. Visionaries.
They are the individuals whose explicit function is to perceive the truth, look into the darkness, and guide the rest of the body.
Okay, let me integrate this. If the I represents the spiritual leader, the mentor, the guide who is supposed to be illuminating the path for you, then what does it mean if your I causes you to sin?
This raises an important question. It means the person leading you is fundamentally corrupt. It means the authority figure you trust, your pastor, your guru, your political commentator, your chosen institution, is feeding you falsehoods.
Their lampstand has been removed,
They are operating in the dark. They are a blind guide.
which totally radically transforms the command. Plucking out the I isn't about physical self-harm. It's about severing ties with corrupt authorities.
It means firing your blind guide.
It's media literacy.
It transforms an act of physical mutilation into an act of profound intellectual and spiritual autonomy. The lecture points out how deeply entrenched these eyes become in our lives.
The leaders in Isaiah are described as drunk, but not with wine.
They are intoxicated by their own confusion, their ego, their worldly philosophies. And if you remain attached to a blind eye, what is the inevitable result?
As Jesus says elsewhere, if the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit.
If you follow a guide who has no light, their darkness becomes your darkness. You go down with the ship, regardless of how sincere your trust was.
Therefore, the command to pluck out the I is a radical necessity for survival. It means you must forcefully, and often painfully, extract these false authorities from your life.
You have to dig them out of your worldview. You must stop listening to them, stop financing them, stop letting them dictate your perception of reality.
It's essentially an ancient mandate for extreme media and spiritual literacy. But let's talk about the psychology of that, because plucking out an I, even metaphorically, is incredibly painful.
Oh, absolutely. These eyes are often beloved institutions. They are mentors we've trusted for decades.
They are traditions our families have held for generations. Cutting them out feels like carrying away a piece of our own identity.
It requires immense courage, which is why the metaphor of self-mutilation is actually perfectly appropriate for the psychological pain involved.
It is agonizing to realize your worldview has been shaped by a blind guide.
It is much easier, much more comfortable, to just keep following them, relying on their confident assertions that they know the way. Digging out a false authority leaves a wound. It leaves you feeling disoriented and maimed.
But the text's logic is brutal and clear. It is infinitely better to lose that comfortable false guide and limp into the truth feeling maimed and uncertain than to keep your blind guide and happily march together into the pit of complete darkness.
You have to remove the false I to make room for the actual truth to illuminate your path.
The psychological weight of that is staggering. We have covered an immense amount of conceptual ground today, decoding a system that is incredibly intricate but surprisingly cohesive once you have the key.
It all connects.
We started in the dark, with the terrifying vulnerability of the ancient night, waiting for a knock at the door, relying on a humble clay lamp to verify the face of the one claiming to bring the truth.
We scaled that concept up to the grand golden architecture of Moses' tabernacle, uncovering the philosophical trap of worshiping the shadow,
The rituals and literal texts.
while ignoring the dynamic spiritual reality casting that shadow.
We took the measurements of that shadow and decoded them using the cosmic math of Revelation, discovering the principle of as above, so below.
We learned that lamps equal churches, and churches equal people.
The ultimate vessels for divine light are not buildings of stone, but human beings holding the spirits of truth.
We deconstructed the bizarre, nightmarish imagery of apocalyptic literature, the seven-horned lambs and seven-eyed stones, revealing them to be sophisticated, multidimensional metaphors for the exact same mechanism.
Human vessels empowered by a perpetual living flow of divine perception.
We confronted the chilling reality of the night and the terrifying consequence of losing the connection to the source.
The horror of the removed lampstand, the leader who becomes a hollow shell, confidently stumbling in the dark with a dead wick.
And we culminated with a radical reinterpretation of violent rhetoric, transforming the grotesque command to pluck out an eye into a profound call for intellectual and spiritual independence, urging the listener to brutally sever ties with any blind guide that leads them away from reality.
It is a paradigm-shifting way to read these texts, and it all brings us right back to you, the listener. As you navigate your own life, moving through a modern world that is arguably suffering from a profound amount of information overload and spiritual darkness, who are your eyes?
Who are the individuals, the institutions, the algorithms, or the media figures that you have outsourced your perception to?
Are the entities guiding you actually connected to the olive trees? Are they filled with the oil of truth illuminating the path ahead? Or have their lampstands been removed?
Are they blind guides, drunk on their own confusion, confidently marching you toward a ditch?
The text demands that you don't just take their word for it. You have to hold up the lamp to their faces and verify the reality.
It is the most vital assessment a person can make. Knowledge is not just about accumulating data. It is about recognizing the source and the trajectory of that data. True critical thinking requires us to continuously question the shadows we have accepted as reality.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over, something that builds directly on the methodology we explored today. If every day, simple words like lamp, night, and I actually contain massive, hidden, coded meanings about human psychology, divine architecture, and corrupt leadership, what other everyday words in these ancient texts are we taking completely for granted?
When an ancient text talks about water, is it just talking about being thirsty, or is there an entire ocean of meaning beneath it?
What does bread really mean? Or a mountain? Or a cloud? The texts we thought we knew, the stories we thought were simple fables, might just be massive, interconnected secret ciphers waiting for us to find the key. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the shadows around you, evaluate your guides carefully, and we will see you next time.